everybody. Welcome back to the Aliens and Angels podcast. And I want everybody to know that all the content on this show is authentic, and I have not used AI to create my scripts or to create the images. Well, actually, the background images are probably AI. I'm not sure where I got this particular one, but the conversations are legit. The conversations you're going to hear on this show are absolutely real. So I'm very honored to bring on my returning guest, Brian Tseng, and today we'll be discussing MilAbs, the Military Abduction Program, and our Star Trek future. And for those of you who are not familiar with Brian Tseng is the Solar Bee who co-organized the 2023 Montauk Adventure Tour to assemble survivors of the Montauk Project for the 80th anniversary of the related Philadelphia experiment and publicize their experiences. He's a regular contributor on the Awake Nation and Agent 12 podcasts, and David Zublick and Penny L.A. Shepherd, as well as being a regular on Jessica the Cryptid Huntress's show and the Typical Skeptic podcast with our good friend Robert Khalil, along with guest appearances on many other shows in any way related to full disclosure. His mission is to rally and organize the worldwide disclosure of secret space programs, military abduction programs, also known as MilAbs, the reality of ET contact, super soldier projects, and the like as a first step to bringing about our collective Star Trek future. Brian is the executive producer for the Full Disclosure Now conference series of international presenters on St. Pete Beach in Florida, July 2024 and 2025 and also will be upcoming in 2026. He's busy working with his executive team to produce, build out, and launch the Full Disclosure Network app and cryptocurrency, given the huge success of the conferences and the need to better organize the full disclosure movement with an ever-growing and amazing community of friends and fellow star seeds. All of the links are featured below in the description. I want to thank you in advance for liking, commenting, subscribing, and please do share my content with your friends. And I also want to mention that you can now join the membership of my YouTube channel, and that way you would receive my perks and you would also help to support my channel. So in advance, I want to thank everybody so very, very much. Okay, without further ado, the Solar Bee, drum roll, everybody. Hi. Hi, Brian. So good to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Karen. I know before we went live here on air, you're expressing interest in the concept of, hello, Denise, and hello, everyone in our audience as well, the concept of military abductees and breakaway civilizations in particular. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is my second time on your show here.
Mm-hmm, it
And
is.
yeah, we can maybe discuss one and then that jumps us into the other.
Sure. Wherever you want to go, Brian, is all good with me and my audience. We're going to love it.
Thank you. So, the whole concept of military abductees is that many of these secret space programs are really through way high levels of secrecy and clearance and off the books and off budget Men in Black type stuff that
Mm-hmm.
Phil Schneider back in the early 90s was talking about and who gave his life to get this message out about deep underground military bases. Often it's nefarious because it's done with our taxpayer money without our knowledge and then being used against us. To this day, especially, we're seeing it being ramped up. And the things that people were conspiracy theorists, especially going back as far as the post World War II era, 1950s, and people were, showing up with like implants, and their skulls showing up on X-rays, and they're really, compared to today's standards, rudimentary, where they now have like literally nano and femto technology that's reverse engineered. Some of it from ETs, just like fiber optics, which went to Bell Labs, from the Roswell crashes and other places like that. So when we say military abductees, the concept is people who are not in the military, civilians, who are being abducted by military forces, generally into what are known as MK Ultra. First, starting with mind control, because that's an aspect of all of these. Unfortunately, that's a holdover from the the Germans who won really World War II. Okay,
Yes. And
and
nobody knows about that. What the heck?
yeah,
Sorry, didn't mean
Operation
to interrupt you.
Paperclip. Yeah, Operation Paperclip with the rat lines, bringing in, I hate Tennessee, Kentucky Bigfoot, bringing in the so-called Dr. Greens, which was really kind of like a code name for various NZI doctors like Joseph Mangala,
Hmm.
okay, Angel of Death, I believe is one of his nicknames, and he had a fondness for twins. And that's because of all the genetic experimentation that he likes, or some people say to this day he may have like clones running around, but at least he survived World War II apparently and went on to do a lot of experimentation. And that's where you get movies like The Boys from Brazil, is literally based on the concept of uh, Hitler making it to, in the case of the movie Brazil, in real life, apparently, is I believe Argentina or
Hmm.
Uruguay, I think Argentina, and then surviving until like 1967 or 68. And I believe these documents have been released or leaked by the CIA themselves. So, you know, and a lot of this stuff is turning up in their documents just 50 years old.
Hmm. Yeah, it's super interesting. Um, so the first time I started seeing research come out, of course, um, informal research, let's put it that way, about Admiral Byrd going down with huge support, military support, and they got basically their butts handed to them on a platter and they just skedaddled out of there. And so I don't know where because we know the Nazi program had advanced technology, especially probably interdimensional technology, possibly time travel technology, and I don't know where that sort of ends and where the whole American um, MilAb program comes in, or are they both two wings of the same bird? What do you think, Brian?
Well, it's all intertwined, Karen, because they
Hmm.
had to send Operation High Jump, led by Admiral Byrd and his naval carrier group, down to Antarctica to check on New Schwabenland. And Brad Olson's done a lot of great reporting on this lately with a letter that apparently has turned up from someone, a German, who made it to New Schwabenland, or was on his way there and wrote to his friend, basically giving him the coordinates or directions. Hey, Beth, thank you for being in our live audience, and others like Hillbilly Herb. Um, but basically, saying, hey, Otto, I'm on my way to New Schwabenland. If you want to follow behind me, it's all real. Everything, but you can't tell anyone, obviously.
Hmm.
And then, that letter is only surfacing, from 1940s Germany to now, right? 2025 ish, because I'm not sure how long ago Brad was able to stumble upon that letter, and then I got to see him present upon it.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was basically the Allied powers trying to catch up to the Germans and the Japanese, because the Germans were basically the ones through the Vril Society, led by Maria Orsic, going back to, I believe, as early as 1920s Germany, but especially 1930s. Um, and they got swooped up and unfortunately used by that regime. It wasn't in time, obviously, to overtly, here on the surface, turn the tide of the war. I mean, Obviously, everyone thinks, the Allies won, you know, World War II. And that's really where you get things like Philip K. Dick and The Man in the High Castle, why that writing is so important. I personally believe, it shows an alternate world parallel timeline where overtly the Japanese and Germans have won World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, the Germans and Japanese, they went from Antarctica to the moon, and then shortly thereafter to Mars and Ceres colony and other places, and then further out. This is under apparently a deal with negative Draco, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why many people in the full disclosure community who I'm citing all of this information is, and I've cross-checked this blind against many of them over the last 4 years now, let's say, 3, 4 years, yeah. John Whitberg, who wrote, this is his true testimony. It's an ebook series to be found online. Please send him donations for his amazing work documenting. And now I believe he's on volume 4 now, The Man with the Periwinkle Eyes. So if anyone
Mm-hmm.
wants to put that in the chat, please feel free to find it. He's got at least 1 or 2 spots online for free ebook writings. And then there's David Purcell, Tim Seabury, Veronica Bartolini, Susan Long, Arkeem Ra, James Rink. There's like so many. I mean, I'm just naming a few, and but their testimonies are lining up about the German breakaway civilization. It's like their Bunden, der free German worlds, Deutsche, frei world, something like that. So it's basically
Mm-hmm.
the Federation of German Free Worlds, and then the Japanese side, who apparently they're, according to John Whitberg, and I believe Tim Seabury agrees, the Japanese and German breakaway civilizations they're joined at the hip and going out into the stars underneath their Draco overlords, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They're the Empire of a Thousand Suns. Riley Newskin also talks about this, and both Riley Newskin and John cite the exact same name in Japanese. And then, of course, it's a play for the Empire of the Sun, the original Japanese.
Yes.
They were taken down by at the end of World War II. And so, in order to catch up to these breakaway civilizations, not just off-world, but also here on planet, or even have a hope of any of that, and also, it's not just like rah 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 go USA. We have to counter these bad Germans and Japanese. Unfortunately, all of our governments have been infiltrated by what many are catching on to like wildfire right now online, the Khazarian mafia types.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Their last holdouts right now are in Israel and Ukraine, and that's why we're having a lot of the most intense geopolitical conflict around those two regions right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just for as long as, I mean, geez, how long has there been conflict in that region of, the Ukraine and, all around the Balkans and, yeah, and then just the Middle East, obviously. So, it's where you see TV shows like Stranger Things in its 5th season, and
Mm-hmm.
they're depicting a very whitewashed, Hollywoodized Operation Mockingbird version, if you will, of what the Montauk Project was really about. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where they're kidnapping civilians, primarily children, like 90% probably plus, because they found children were the only ones psionically gifted or powerful enough to, when you strap them into something known as a Montauk trip chair out at Camp Hero Army Base, is where I'll start to share my screen,
Okay.
out in the very east end of Long Island, New York.
Mm-hmm.
There's Brian Minnick of Montauk is Strange. He's been doing a lot to document the Montauk Project, which the military codenames were like Operation Rainbow Bridge, Project Phoenix. I've misquoted in the past. I thought Project Ibis was there. John Whitberg has corrected me. He said I think it was at it was at an Air Force base, but now I don't remember which one, and I don't want to misquote it. But I do want to correct. I don't want to discredit him by misquoting him.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you saw people like William Tompkins, who wrote "Selected by Extraterrestrials," talking about helping the U.S. Navy with their secret space program efforts to catch up to the space Germans and Japanese. They were converting submarines and battleships to go into space. Which for me is hugely ironic. I'm a huge Star Blazer or fan.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a Japanese anime where they were converting like huge carrier ships when they're flying around in space, and it
Mm-hmm.
was fantastical at the time, obviously. But here I am talking about people who have naval intelligence type credentials, and many other whistleblowers have come out. Many people here will be familiar with the Gary McKinnon UK hacker leaks of extraterrestrial personnel related
Mm-hmm.
to Solar Warden program, of which, you know, um, William Tompkins was citing the SSS Hillenketter as being part of one of the ships in this program,
Mm-hmm.
like a carrier level ship. And then, of course, the German name is no coincidence, given yet Werner von Braun, one of the lead rocket scientists of the Nazi space program, being brought over to head NASA. And then
Mm-hmm.
NASA, of course, I'm sure everyone, I say NASA, and half our audience at least is given an eye roll, especially with the
Yep.
latest Atlas debacle.
Yep. 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 Um, Yes, sorry, I'm going yes, because I'm a little bit scattered between the chat and here. I just want to take a minute to welcome people. I know you did already, Brian, but I like to recognize them too. Denise is our ever faithful moderator. She's absolutely amazing, takes care of everything, puts all the links in the live chat for everybody. And then we've got Euro Soup Cruzoff, 1261. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Of course, Tennessee, Kentucky, Bigfoot, Hillbilly Herb, and Beth Noyes, 2604. And oh, yes, Kristen Kruger, nice to see you. We also had Helena in here earlier. And I think I have everybody. I just wanted to let you all know how much I appreciate you being here. I know Brian does too. So, on that happy note, Brian, can you explain to me and my audience how there's a connection between what you've already talked about and the breakaway civilizations, the MilAbs? Maybe that's too much to ask all at once, but I got to tell you, a lot of people who have told me their experience, especially with so-called the Greys, they say, well, there's American military, or they're taken to deep underground dumps. I know I'm dumping a lot on you, brother, but can you get into how this stuff is interrelated?
Yeah, so basically, Earth, we are a intergalactic species of humanity here on Earth. Okay, where we've been seeded by like 22 to 24, I'm told, or in all of my research is the same numbers keep coming up. Different starseed nations, quote unquote, who contributed their genetics, including the reptilians. That's where we get the reptilians part of the brain from the
Mm-hmm.
hardwired circuitry for survival, and ruthlessness if it's abused, but survival at its best and at its core.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to basically be the human experiment, and thus we're a genetic repository. And then you get these species, many of which are these gray type species. Some are, mistaken as being biological when they're really humanoid robot, like cyborg, or they're more robot or synthetic than they are
Mm-hmm.
actual being. Sometimes, because there's so many races and species out there, it seems like you get these grays who are more or less, towards that cyborgized transhumanism type thing and
Mm-hmm.
technology versus an organic. Having said that, with a lot of the grays, why they seem to feature so prominently in abduction lore and testimony, not just lore, but really out there, over and over and over again, is that the grays themselves, it seems like those species, probably not, may not all of them, but a lot of them tend to be species that may have regressed themselves,
Mm-hmm.
where because they've, through warfare and pollution, uh, on their own planets or going away from their own home worlds after thousands or even hundreds of thousands or millions of years, they lose a lot of capability to genetically reproduce normally. And if you ask me 25 years ago how soon that would take to happen potentially to the human race, I would say, oh gosh, hundreds of years from now, thousands of years. But with all the attack that humanity has been under as of late, especially these last, since 2001 and the big nine, that September, event, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they shifting the timeline towards the negative, temporarily, because they can't just get away with negative backlashes without consequences.
Mm-hmm.
If they attack, there's going to be a backlash to that attack. So, but with we're asking about these groups, and I'm sorry, going back to, oh yeah, with the Greys, they themselves are needing human DNA to perhaps replenish and restore their own genetics. And then also, a lot of these gray species have been, in some cases, dominated and overtaken by, say, negative insectoid and reptilian and Anunnaki species in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Or they themselves are negative grays, and then they're having these negative treaties. But, for example, you get a lot of abductees saying, yeah, they were taken by grays. They had all these negative experiments done. It was not pleasant. They barely remember anything. They've got marks on them. And then when they return, they've
Mm-hmm.
got the wrong clothing on them, or it's on backwards and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm told by people in our community, like Audrey Walters, who is also here on YouTube, she does Star Netlink Academy, I believe, Space School. She talks about this. That's a lot of the grays. That's like their way of protest. They're like not doing their job perfectly for their own insectoid or Anunnaki or reptilian overlords. Generally, probably insectoid or reptilian overlords that case. And so they're sending people back, but they're not being entirely discreet about the abduction scenario. Obviously,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, up until more recently, I didn't really know what to make of some of these ex um, statements that people are making about having these horrible experiences at the hands of the Greys. I myself have only ever had positive experiences with more the transdimensional type of beings, angels, ETs, different things like that, that aren't exactly here. Of course, they're not exactly there either. That's another whole show. But then I started hearing all these and I didn't want to discount these experiences, but I wanted to find out more about it because is it really ET doing it? Or is this something that's human initiated, human development with human agendas? What's your take
it's a
on that?
mix of it's a mix of all of it. So, for
Mm,
example, here when you bring yourself back on the screen, look at the background here of your screenshot.
yeah.
You got a mix here of generally from this depiction. Let's say it's AI generated art. I've got no problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's these are probably what we would say are on the positive spectrum of beings, right? But
Mm-hmm.
just like you got that spectrum, left to right, up and down, let's say, let's just say in terms of vibration and frequency, okay, you know, people might say, oh, you're being judgmental, but in terms of vibrational frequency and dimensionality, you've got
Mm-hmm.
those are at lower vibrating versus higher vibrating. And then what you're
Mhm.
depicting there and what you're familiar with personally from your testimony is the more experienced beings, I mean the higher vibration beings, and then across that spectrum, within that spectrum of higher vibration beings.
Mhm.
Having said that, what what exists, is of course that higher vibration spectrum, but then of course there's a lower vibration spectrum. And then
Mhm.
let's say us here, humanity, generally will call ourselves midpoint neutral, right? Or just within that scale, we're kind of more middling.
Mhm.
We've got our own left, right, of like the negative towards the positive, you know, higher vibration, lower vibration, of like those who are with the negative type programs, kidnapping
Mhm.
children, torturing them, doing ritual abuse, and that's where not only are we talking about beings of a biological, physical nature, but we're also getting interdimensional and even up to, at the highest levels, angelic, at the lowest
Mhm.
levels, demonic.
Mhm. Mhm.
Very.
That makes perfect sense. Absolutely perfect sense. And yeah, so and that goes for humans and everything else. The other thing I was going to ask you, if this is too big a question, just ignore it, we'll move on. But what we believe is nefarious or in a beneficial or not beneficial really can be quite different from an ET perspective, especially if they're like thousands of years more advanced than us, maybe even millions. And they're probably able to see the bigger picture. If they are able to do fifth and sixth dimensional reality, they would see things very, very different. Is there any chance, in your opinion, you don't have to give an expert opinion, just in your own opinion, do you think that it kind of depends on your perspective of where you're coming from? You might be doing something to humanity. They feel really upset about it, but it's for us in the long run for our benefit. Does that make any sense?
So there are many beings that put that argument forward, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them may be actually saying that in their best interests
Mm-hmm.
and doing it so, and then there are many imposters. And
Mm.
of course, it's where discernment is so hugely important. And then a field like this, it's so difficult because we're already in a field that's considered very woo from the get-go. And so
Mm-hmm.
if it's woo and then you're trying to research it and then people are debating it, because just trying to have a dialogue out there with the masses, there's a significant population who they get stuck on all ETs are demons, right? So
Yes,
that whole
yes.
spectrum thing that I explained, like, well, aren't there
Mm-hmm.
angels? Like, if they understand they're demons, most people understand they're demons, will understand they're angels too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
if there are, then there's a spectrum of ETs who they themselves may acknowledge angels and demons, and then there are ETs who actually will consort with negative demonic entities. So it's like, a reptilian ET who exists here in the 340, 5D levels, maybe not 5D,
Mm-hmm.
but at least 3D level. And spiritually, they have a hard time ascending with their maybe perhaps a, a less developed soul matrix to get up to the
Mm-hmm.
higher densities of consciousness. Okay, but they're very alpha down here at the third density for sure, and they are in league with negative demonic type beings to enslave humanity. And that's something that blows my mind is the concept that not only do you have positive and negative ETs, positive and negative angelic demonic beings, but then they themselves can have an interplay with each other, just like we
Mm-hmm.
have an interplay with them. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
look out there and see all the testimonies, it seems to me that's indeed what you see happening. You see
Mm-hmm.
people who talk about in their testimonies being in these secret space programs or where they have to sign stacks of papers or documents, release forms, and then among the clauses is they're not allowed to say Jesus or Yeshua while on base,
Interesting. Interesting.
and that can actually it can disrupt operations. So what does that tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it means, and then when we look at it, I mentioned the Vril Society. They were picked up by the Black Sun Society in
Mm-hmm.
Germany. Those are very negative, occult worshiping, demonic type. That's where the a lot of it's linked to the Saturnian black cube type worship, all of
Mm-hmm.
that, the Sun and Schwartz, and then that's where you get like, also like Nachtwaff and Night Fleet or whatever, Dark Fleet,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So it's a big, big thing going on. And most humans are completely unaware of it, have no idea this is going on. Um, I don't know. Do you think it's all going to come out in the wash? I feel like it is. I feel like we're getting to the point now where whether you're talking about Epstein or whether you're talking, these are all components of the same thing. And it requires money laundering. It includes active slave labor trade, includes the SRA. Like, is this really like this whole reality? Do you think it's all interconnected, Brian? And what do you think the ultimate goal is?
So I take a very Dolores Cannon overview. She was the
Mm-hmm.
founder, creator, people say of QHHT, quantum hypnosis healing technique. And, uh, over like thousands of regressions and speaking with people's higher selves, like the same messaging was coming through over and over. In regards to your question in Earth and how out of whack things are, and just, it's like you're basically talking about Earth being a prison planet, a soul trap, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, God's source, Mother, Father, God's source himself, herself, put out a call to all of creation to say, hey, who wants to incarnate into a maelstrom blender here to turn things around because things are so out of whack, we need to
Yeah.
change this. And then that's where we get, first, second, and third wave volunteers, people, beings. Uh, uh, ISBEs is what the Farsight Institute likes to call us. All
Mm-hmm.
everybody, every being, like eternal spirit beings. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
forget the actual, uh, what it stands for, but the concept that I'd say maybe you and Dolores Cannon would be considered more first wave. I'm kind of like a middle between the first and second wave, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And then uh, our children and grandchildren are like or like a lot of the younger people in the community right now who are active. That's the second wave, and then the third
Mm-hmm.
wave are more like the really young people and people being born now would be the third wave.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yep, I would agree with that. So, um, I know that most people want a peaceful reality. They don't want to fight, they don't want to steal, they don't want to hurt anybody. They just want to look after their families and have meaningful work. And that would lead us into the Star Trek future. Now, I don't want to push you into that if you're not ready. Maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the MilAbs and stuff. But I think that this beautiful, even transdimensional future, I think there's a spiritual component as we raise our frequencies. What's your take on that, Brian? Where do you see this all headed for us?
Yeah, well, you really nailed it right there when you were talking about the technology, but really then spirituality. The spirituality has to come first.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, that's where we get into the danger of going down the path that, unfortunately many of these gray species have found themselves down. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, but definitely some of them, many of them apparently have, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go down that route. Um, you know, apparently, uh, by some counts, John Whitberg would put us at hundreds of millions, or sorry, billions. Like we're up to almost a trillion humans off planet, off world right now.
Off world.
Because if you listen to our good friend Penny Bradley, who many of us we do, and many people I ask about, hey, what Penny's saying is when she says this, what does that ring true to you? And like, yeah, blah blah blah. And then other people like, yeah, not only that, and then they'll give me more information. So I'm like, okay, and then that'll link up with other people that I'll cross check against. So like, that's what I've been doing all my time in the community here as a self-appointed volunteer organizer advocate in the full disclosure movement. And
Mm-hmm.
with time travel, doing things like going back in time to ancient battlefields with these dark fleet, breakaway German groups who are using time travel and space travel and advanced technology to regenerate people and even re bring them back from the dead if it's within like a 24 and then 48-hour period. Apparently they got
Mm-hmm.
it made it a little bit longer where they were like re-snag you back from the other side and stick at least enough of a soul shard in you to animate whatever body they of yours that they cloned or regenerated. And
Wow.
as a Valkyrie, she would be visiting these ancient battlefields, chopping off the heads of fallen warriors, flying them back up to her ship, where they would, this is not of her own volition. She's made to do this. They regenerate these fallen Viking and Norse type, warriors or whatever battlefield, drop them off on whatever planet like that they time traveled thousands of millions of years, however far back, to basically colonize that planet. And you had hardy people who would terraform a planet who didn't need technology, who thought they were in Valhalla.
Yes, yes, that makes
And,
sense.
and then you watch movies like Rebel Moon,
Mm-hmm.
one and two, and like by Zack Snyder. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. This is like Warhammer in space. Why would what Nazis in space? What's going on here? And then like now understanding what's going on, and people's testimony, like, oh, that's what that's about. Okay, because
Mm-hmm.
people are like that's more real than you think, Brian. That's what I'm
I
told.
think it I think it might be, Brian, because even the original Star Trek series, I think there was only three seasons of it. There is one episode where they go to a planet and there's Nazis that are also reptilians. And I thought that was absolutely amazing foreshadowing of how those populations are intertwined, working together. And what amazes me, of course, is how they knew to write all that stuff off in a script. How they knew that ahead of time before any of us, but it was great
I can tell you how.
foreshadowing.
I can tell you how.
Oh, okay, sure.
Basically, Gene Roddenberry, creator of the Star Trek series, sat in 1950s, even might have been as early as the 50s, but definitely by the 60s, Berkeley, seances, quote unquote, but they were really channeling sessions with more neutral positive, at least compared to the negative Draco reptilian, negative Anunnaki, and negative gray, negative type, insectoid beings who want to dominate us, right? The negative Orion, hive mind, Naboo type complex, or whatever the grouping they are, because they
Yeah.
always break apart and fight against each other as well in their
Hmm.
enslavement of the rest of us, or attempts to. And Gene Roddenberry, during these sessions, I forget who the channeler was receiving the information, but Gene Roddenberry got the information for the Prime Directive, and then other people have come forward in the full disclosure community with like the full written out, not like the Cliff's Notes version that they put in Star Trek, and it
Hmm.
really goes into it, and they talk about it blow by blow, like why, and it makes a lot of sense about not
Hmm.
stunting the development of other civilizations, which our secret space programs, unfortunately, negatively have done by using time travel to go back in time and take over all these other planets and rocks and moons and whatever. That by all rights, if we hadn't done that using abusing time travel, there would be other species on those planets and places unfettered by human presence. Not that I'm
Hmm.
not saying like humans shouldn't go out there and explore amongst the stars, but we also shouldn't like, you know, cheat other beings out of their home territory for, you know, for our gain. That's not right. And there's a lot of backlash to that. That's one reason why there's a lot of apparently hatred and fear amongst various species towards humans, because our
Mm-hmm.
reputation is being used as like the little, negative, you know, human monkey fleet to like use the dangerous toys that were given by the negative Draco and Anunnaki and whoever to rampage out there amongst the stars. And then that's where I'm getting reports from people in our community who are being approached, and a lot of them are doing interviews, shows like this, typical skeptic podcast, where they're being approached to help undo a lot of the wrongs that a lot of us, I'm told I'm in the programs by multiple people,
Mm-hmm.
bl- a blind basis. People have told me, like, and they corroborates like what they're telling me again,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, like I might have been, for example, an astronavigator on one of these ships to shuttle around to these places where they could then, terrorize the local species, take their stuff, and try to get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. So when we take a step back, like we have today, and we look at the bigger picture and how everything is so interconnected, like I totally get that we need, if we want to bring about change, we need to raise our frequencies. We need to become the change we want to see in the world. But what I'm curious to know, Brian, is if you could offer us some hope, because quite honestly, the wicked and the bad and the ugly is so big here on earth. All these programs, everything's so big. Can ordinary people, by being good, by being loving, by raising their frequency, treating their bodies properly, everything, can we somehow make a difference? How are we going to dissolve this big quagmire, this
So
big mess, so we can have the happy life?
it's all of what you said, but more, Karen, because Arkeem Ra, he testifies that he's got a soul fragment alter named Edward Hughes in a parallel who lives or is from a parallel Earth timeline,
Mhm.
which is about 4.5 years or so ahead of this timeline in linear time. If you were to like just, I don't know, for some reason hop directly over, I don't know or understand the timing of how that works, but
Yeah.
apparently, according to the Edward, in that more positive timeline, they caught on to the fact that the Vatican and that church is the wolf in sheep's clothing to
Mhm.
undermine Christendom, and that's why they are the head of like human trafficking and all these this theft of all these resources and behind the royal families, or in league with, intertwined with,
Mhm.
and all the giant skeletons and technology, and gold apparently in their catacombs, and if you look up these international criminal justice court, ICJC, I
Mhm.
forget what it is,
Yeah.
led by Robert Christopher Steele, I think, who was assassinated, unfortunately, I believe, last year, who is outing a lot of the evil things. Well, in this more
Mhm.
positive timeline, the people much earlier they stood up to that, and they didn't allow any entities hurting, especially children, to keep
Mhm.
doing that. And you know, here we are in this timeline. Instead of stomping that out and exposing it, at least 1,000 years ago, plus in their timeline, they had like a timeline where Tartaria was never wiped out, where they had airships and
Mhm.
smaller cars and not huge, highway networks, but smaller regional networks, and you'd get around by airship and much cleaner technology and cheaper, and everyone's dressed like Dick Tracy or the positive side of the Matrix, where they're looking like their idealized selves because
Mhm.
that was their culture, and people are much more spiritually evolved and telepathic, and so it's a combination of we need to be more courageous in once people are like, we need the Epstein files, we need the Epstein files, they've been already been released, we already know
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm.
Okay, we already and those names have already been released and leaked. We should see them over and over and over again. Nothing's stopping the rest of us from saying, okay, Tom Hanks, Ellen DeGeneres, Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, blah, 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 all these people, and then the people above them, the music producers and the Clive Davises and the
Yeah.
people above them and all that, who've been named over and over and over by people way better known than myself, like I'm like nobody on this scene, right? And uh, in doing so, that's spiritually true and loving and courageous. People say, "Oh no, you're just focusing on the darkness. Don't focus on them. Focus on evolving yourself, love and light." But if we're not calling out the people who we know are abusing children on islands in the
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean and taking Disney scuba tours there, okay,
Mm-hmm.
then we're just a bunch of hypocrites, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
spiritually evolved. There's nothing spiritual about that. In terms of the full disclosure movement and spirituality and raising our vibration, in order to raise our vibration spiritually, we have to know the truth so that we can confront whatever darkness or evil. Unfortunately, in this case, we have to, but in the spirit and love of truth, okay, in pursuit of truth. And then in doing that, now we're vibrating at a higher frequency spiritually. Because we can only vibrate so high as humanity, as any society, if we're all brainwashed and buying into these transhumanist, soulless lies. They always want to leave out and negate the soul. It was
Mm-hmm.
science and their transhumanism. Okay, they're always leaving out the soul. But we, in understanding, wow, we're, not just descended from apes. We have a starseed family. We're interdimensional. Some of us come from even angelic or even demonic, realms, and have incarnated here, and we're all moshed together in this mixing bowl, okay, in this crap show right now because it's things have veered too far to the negative and not just negative but into the evil. They now have to be
Mm-hmm.
won and recovered and brought back out.
Mm-hmm. This has been a very interesting visit, Brian. I want to thank you so much. And everything you've talked about leads into your conferences because, of course, that's your prime directive. Can you tell everybody about what your conferences are about, the next one that's coming up, how people can get a hold of you, anything else that you're up to, upcoming shows that you might have, or anything like that? I'll add this to the stage so people can see. Yeah, why don't you go for it and let us know, where we can learn more, I guess is
Okay.
the
Yeah, so
point.
this is a website for the conference series, fulldisclosure.live. And then here are some of the presenters. Um, we right now, we're trying to, there's a lot of directions we're taking right now, and I'm running into obviously a lot of backlash and blockades.
No, it's
And
so bad.
it's actually been a mixed blessing, as rough and terrible as it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Certain people or factions they've revealed themselves in a way that it's much better to know now than
Yes.
after getting all this stuff launched. So right
Yes.
now, I'm going to be very vague about my upcoming plans, but
Okay, fair enough.
but know that right now, it's continuing to be on shows like this, disseminating information through my social media, like Facebook. I've now got like 30,000 quote unquote followers for whatever that's worth. It's I'm trying to get the word out there. So here's like my Facebook profile, and people can always send me direct messages to Brian Tseng and add my nickname or call sign Solar B. Especially if there's something that you want to do that's pertinent to the movement, especially if there's any way that you want to support or help the movement. Because right now, I'm getting a lot more calls, always need for help, and it's totally understandable. And then there's always very few offers of support, like none. And there are people out there who I refer to as fat dragons sitting on huge amounts of resources, at least compared to the rest of us, and they're not
Mm,
doing anything, you know?
mm-hmm.
And it's like twisting their arm to do anything. And
Mm-hmm.
if they ever want a Star Trek future where we have these technologies free and available and implemented in our society, people
Mm-hmm.
have to know that these technologies exist,
Mm-hmm.
much less the fact that they're being used against us for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. I agree. So that's very, very interesting. So everybody, please check out the links for the upcoming conference are down below. You'll want to start preparing ahead of time. When is the conference again, Brian? It's in Florida, and when is it again?
We're
July?
aiming we're aiming for the middle of July, but I still have not yet locked in the exact dates. It's St. Pete
Okay.
Beach at the Serrata Beach Resort,
Mm-hmm.
and but I'm still we might pivot because it depends on what projects we do. There's a lot of different, and they're all amazing. Like they all have
Mm-hmm.
little you know, they're all consistent with advancing us to our Star Trek future, and anything
Mm-hmm.
that does that is uh, literally world changing.
Mm-hmm. I would agree 100%. You know, I believe that I signed up to come to Earth at this time, but I'm a bit of a whiny baby going, I didn't know it was going to be this hard, you know. And but anyway, I'm in it for the long haul. I know you are too. I know much of our audience is as well. Do you have any words of comfort, I guess, for lack of a better term, for us? Because quite a few of us are suffering, not just from, struggling to have enough to buy the proper food, have decent housing. I mean, it gets starts off close to home, and then it goes into our health. And oh my God, what a debacle with the I'm going to call it a medical industry because that's what I see it as. And you could just go on and on and on. Next thing you know, you could just be in your house in bed watching Netflix for the rest of your life because it's too disturbing. And those of us that are sensitive, we really get what's going on. So it hurts us, but we're willing to do that to try to keep moving us to, on that new positive timeline. And I think getting from one timeline to another is this could be, I'm not saying it is, but could be as simple as us changing our perspective, changing the way we feel about ourselves, learning what is the meaning of love. But I don't want to ramble on too much. This is your moment in the spotlight. I would really love it if you would share with us what can those sensitive spiritual people do in order to cope and to keep going in that positive timeline direction.
Well, you know, there's a concept, and many in our community talk about this, that by vibrating and being in your highest self, um, you can then help in a quantum entanglement way access the higher timeline,
Mm-hmm,
by
mm-hmm,
being more true, living in as much integrity as you can. That's a big one
mm-hmm,
because part of the tumult we're seeing in these times, as everything is being revealed and the contradictions are coming to the surface, you can't but have falling away between people, or nasty breakups, or a lot of tension, or
mm-hmm,
realizing that someone that you thought was a friend is someone who's actually trying to undermine you actively behind your back. And
mm-hmm,
all that is coming to light. It's like the end of a snake year, Scorpio moon. The other side, they're losing. And so for me, it's the other side. If people who've seen me on other interviews, and thank you, Denise, for that. Shout out. Uh, it's like the evil ones are Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball, and they tried to swing and bash through the other side,
mm-hmm,
of goodness, and they bounced off. They weren't able to break through. But even though they weren't able to break through, we're still way swung into the dark forest over here.
mm-hmm,
Okay. And we got to swing all the way back. So part of that is living your best life in integrity, armoring up the armor of God in Ephesians
mm-hmm.
6 to 18, 6, 12, 12, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 12 to 18, something like that. And the armor of God, where you're protecting your mind and you're living in righteousness and you have
Mm-hmm.
the right worldview and perspective. And then by doing that, you're linking up with other people, hopefully around you, who are also living in integrity, right? And then
Mhm.
off of that, we're supporting each other. We're demanding, we're like getting out this information, waking up more people. And as we do that, that's where we're having an effect spiritually. But then as more people become aware of like the advanced medical technologies and start clamoring for that, and the spiritual
Mhm.
meditation aids and like the Gateway series and things like that, there's going to be a cumulative effect. And that's what's
Mhm.
happening more and more and more. It's like what I believe 2012 kind of pointed at, like this awakening process,
Yes.
a dying away of the old world. And yeah, the other thing is having a lifetime perspective on this. You know,
Mhm.
it also says in the good book there, life is but a puff of steam in the eyes of God. And, to us, 70, 80, 90, 100 years might seem like a long time, obviously, and it is in this perspective. But in the perspective of like many of us, probably you're listening to this, are star seed, you've lived many dozens, if not hundreds, or even thousands of incarnations um, all over the place. This is a crazy, wild ride. And like everyone who has near death experiences and they come back and they talk about it, they talk about how like they were in a horrendous car accident. They know if they come back to complete their life mission, they're also going to go through like a lot of pain recovering from this physical car accident. And
Mhm.
guess what? It seems like a huge amount of them, they choose to come back. So what does that tell you? It tells you that, this third density, oh my God, bills and aging and retirement, how am I going to do this and that, and take care of my children and grandchildren and the stresses of all of that. That's at the third density level. Fourth density level, it seems like the perspective, and especially fifth, is like, this is all meant to be. It's a wild and crazy ride. Enjoy it while you're here, even the ups and the downs, and do the best you
Yes.
can. And if you want a Star Trek future, get involved and get organized. We're not helpless. If you want to sit back and watch Netflix, I'm not criticizing you, but if you want to see clean energy and environmental cleanup technology and hoverboards, I want to see those. Then there's lots of things that we can do of a very highly productive nature, and many people are doing it, not just going to conferences and holding conferences, but getting the information out there. People who are gifted in astral projection and remote viewing and are armored up with the armor of God and angelic and godly protection, going on missions to save children and assist. That's happening. Am I doing
Mhm.
it? No. Can I report on it? Yeah.
Wonderful. So there is reason for hope and reason for optimism. And I think that's why, we come together because we share this basically good news with each other. It helps us to cope and helps us to know we're not alone. We've got each other. That's why I started this podcast, was to zero in. I know it's the fringe of the fringe, but I wanted to zero in and have a safe space for people who have had contact, whether it's aliens, angels, or something else. Like, it's our perceptions that give us our experiences. And I wanted everyone, to be able to do that. And I've been extremely satisfied with the results. The community on here, every live I do, whichever show I do, everybody has been absolutely wonderful. And I really appreciate the effort that those that come to the live chat put out, because they have to schedule time and actually be here and listen and communicate and share. It's wonderful. And I love all of you very much. Just want you all to know how much I appreciate you all for being here. Of course, I also appreciate those that are listening to audio podcasts, those that are listening on replays. You can find me just about everywhere. And please remember that Brian's links are all in the description below. So please don't hesitate to reach out to him. He's very friendly and very easy to talk to. Nice, one of the nicest people I've met in a long time. And I just want you all to benefit as much as possible from this show and from this channel. So with all of that being said, I would just ask Brian, do you have anything last minute you want to share before we say goodbye until next time?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me once again on your amazing show here, Karen. And I'll reiterate like the Thanksgiving message I gave out, on Thursday was, it's been a rough year, but we're going to get through it. Next year will be better. Even with all the chaos in the world, we're here. We're meant to be here. We signed up for this, and things are going to get better. And please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. And Brian, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back. This is your second time on, and still, we have barely scratched the surface. So
Yeah.
please feel free to reach out to me as well if you've got a presentation or some new information or anything you want to share. You'd be very welcome. I'm also always on the lookout for nice people that have had some kind of paranormal, ET, angelic, whatever experience. So Brian, yourself, and anybody who is watching the show, please feel free to send me an email with any recommendations, people you'd like to see on the show to be my guests, and I would love to invite them, and we'll start a new lineup in January. So that's about it for today. Thank you again. Much love to everybody, and I hope you have the best week ever. Thank you for joining me for the Aliens and Angels podcast. Read about my true life ET contact in my book called Transdimensional Meet the New Neighbors, which is now available on Amazon worldwide. Subscribe to my YouTube, Rumble, and X channels at Karen Holton TV. The like button and leave me a comment, and please do share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All of the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you'll also find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.